Well, hello and good morning. Welcome to another Sunday morning coffee with Dr. Childress here. So today I'm going to be discussing the upcoming AFCC convention. It's coming to Seattle, so that should be very interesting. Since I am in Seattle, I don't travel anymore. Old guy, I don't like to travel. You know, health reasons and travel reasons and everything. I've seen everywhere I want to see. So I'm happy on my little island off the coast here. But as long as they're coming to Seattle, I guess the universe would like me to attend. So I wanted to just spend a few moments touching base with everybody about what an interesting turn of events this is. So they're coming, and you can see their nice little logo with a space needle and the mountain. Um, and but that's my mountain. Okay, that's mine. They're coming to me. So this should be a very interesting um, confrontation. I'm reminded of the statement that if you have the faith of as a grain of a mustard seed, you will say to this mountain, "Move from here to there," and it will move. So, yep, bring it. Come to the come to the land of Emerald City here. Now, one of the interesting things about that is that, well, we'll just start with the New York Blue Ribbon Commission here that said on an 11-9 margin, a majority of commission members favor elimination of forensic custody evaluations entirely, arguing that these reports are biased and harmful to children, lack scientific or legal value. At worst, evaluations can be dangerous, particularly in situations of domestic violence and child abuse. So they're calling it, this is the only review ever conducted of this, and the outside independent review finds them to be dangerous, harmful to children, lack scientific or legal value, and vote to eliminate them entirely from the family courts. Now, pathology can be dangerous, but when the psychologists are dangerous and harmful to children, that's pretty bad. And so the question becomes, well, why are they allowed to do this? Why are psychologists allowed to do dangerous things that are harmful to children and result in potentially disastrous consequences for parents and children? Because of regulatory capture and institutional betrayal. Simple as that. They came along in the 1980s and got a hold of the AFCC here. That's their mouthpiece, that's their megaphone to promote their experimental new approach of a quasi judicial role for doctors and this experimental forensic custody evaluation thing they do. It's absolutely awful. I get to review them. Don't get one, but that's the only thing you can get in the family courts because they don't offer clinical diagnostic assessments. They withhold those from the courts and only give the courts their experimental forensic custody evaluation, which is so bad and in violation of all three principles of the Belmont report. And it's just a nightmare situation over here. And the question becomes, where are the licensing boards? Well, that's the regulatory capture thing. And over the past 15 years, I've done 1.05 and I've notified the AFCC at their convention in 2017. So I presented a set of slides that said, you're not competent in attachment and delusions and family systems and things. And they don't care about ethics codes. They don't care about competence. They're allowed to do whatever they want. So then I also notified the APA Ethics Committee in 2018, and they don't care. There was no response to a petition to the APA signed by 19,000 parents and zero response from the APA. That's the institutional betrayal. And so then I was continuing to move on. Then we ran into COVID. And so that put me a little off track. But then in 2025, now, here's the interesting thing. In 2025, I took a course from the AFCC, and that resulted in me notifying the AFCC again, this time the board of directors, about the ethical violations, and the APA again, this time the Ethics Committee, about the instructors. So we're still in the midst of everything. Now here's the situation relative to the forensic psychologists who are coming to Seattle. All of them are coming to Seattle, and they are all of them, every single one of them, in violation of Standard 2.01 boundaries of competence. That's with attachment and delusional thought disorders, family systems, complex trauma, personalities, a lot of other things as well. But we'll just stay with attachment and delusions, since it's an attachment pathology and the allied parent's delusional. They should be competent in those, but they're not. 2.04, bases for scientific and professional judgments, requires them to apply the established knowledge of professional psychology as a basis for their judgment. That would be attachment and delusional thought disorders, DSM-5, family systems, personality disorders, all that information they should be applying. But here's the thing. If you're in violation of 2.01 and you don't know the necessary knowledge, then you can't apply the knowledge. So then it'll cascade into a violation of 2.04. Then if you don't know the knowledge and you don't apply the knowledge, then that's a violation of 9.01 bases for assessment, because their opinions are not based in information and techniques sufficient to substantiate their findings. And 9.01 cites directly to 2.04. So now we've got 3 ethical violations by all the forensic psychologists who are coming to Seattle are in violation of 3 ethical standards of the APA, when they should be in violation of none of them. They're all mandatory. Oh my goodness. And then if you don't know the knowledge, you don't apply the knowledge, and your basis for your assessment is flawed, then you're going to misdiagnose the pathology in the family, which is exactly what's happening, which is avoidable harm. And so that's a violation of 3.04, avoiding harm. So you get this cascade of 4 ethical violations. I run into it every single time I review a custody evaluation of this stuff. Now, when I review the custody evaluation, that tells me there's a violation of 2.04. I run it through with my AI, and AI will talk about it, and there's no application of attachment or delusional thought disorders or family systems or complex trauma or nothing. And we walk through that, and yet they report a lot of symptoms. They're reporting all the attachment symptoms, disorganized attachment, severe attachment pathology, but they're not applying any attachment knowledge. And then they report the delusional thought disorder is pretty clear in their reporting of symptoms, but they don't apply or assess for delusional thought disorder. So it's just a nightmare. But that's a report, but you can't get those into the licensing boards, because the licensing boards grant the custody evaluators quasi-judicial immunity. They can do whatever they want. They're exempt from the APA ethics standards. So that's why it's so bad. That's why they're doing dangerous things, experimenting on human subjects. Just do whatever you want. So it is so bad. But so you can't get any. That's the regulatory capture, that they've given them quasi-judicial immunity. But now their vita is not subject to any of the restrictions. They don't get quasi-judicial immunity for 2.01 vita competence, and it requires no release of information. That's just their vita and background. And so that's so easy to do. You just get a little AI program and you say, review this vita for competence in attachment and delusional thought disorders, and it'll just run it through and say, nope, there's nothing there. There's no attachment competence evident, no delusional thought disorder competence evident. That's your violation of 2.01. And I've got the little protocol. It's up on my website, the VEIS. I did it with ELISA 4.0. Oh, and I got some interesting news about AI, but we'll deal with that later. So the protocol for that is up there. And when I did that protocol, I ran through 6 forensic custody evaluators, 6 top the custody evaluators in the AFCC, and none of them are competent in attachment. None of them are competent in delusional thought disorders, but all of them do a lot of custody evaluations. And that's your little triad, a pattern that you're looking for in the AFCC. No competence delusions, no competence attachment, and a lot of custody evaluations. It's so bad and so easy to document. And so that's already documented with that. And then I went through personally and looked at their Vita and did a workup of their Vita, and that's up on my website. Now, the interesting thing about the convention coming to Seattle is not only are they in violation, and they're also in violation of 8.01 institutional approval, no IRB approval for their experiment on human subjects. So that's 5 ethical standards. Jeez Louise, they are just like totally out of compliance, and no one cares. They don't care. The licensing boards don't care. The APA doesn't care. Nobody cares that you're just having your lives destroyed. And that's the regulatory capture, institutional betrayal. And what you're going through is called institutional betrayal trauma. And we have hundreds of thousands of children and parents who are victims of institutional betrayal trauma. That's Freud, F-R-E-Y-D. So we got 5 ethical violations there. Now, the interesting thing is I have mandatory, required ethical obligations. Ethics code is not optional. 1.04 informal resolution of ethical violations and 1.05 reporting ethical violations. So 1.04 says, if I believe there may have been an ethical violation by another psychologist, so the bar is really low. I don't need to prove it. I just need to believe it. And I don't need to, for sure, there may have been. Well, I'm pretty confident there is. I've reviewed their Vitas and I've seen their work and stuff. So yeah, they're in violation of 2.01, 2.04, 9.01, 3.04, and 8.01. So now 1.04 for me is met. And now I have to take steps for informal resolution. That's what 1.04 says. So what that involves for me is sending a letter, a 1.04 letter to the psychologist saying, I think you're in violation of some ethical standards here. Now, when I took a course from the AFCC with 6 instructors, 4-day course, 8 modules, and I believe there may have been an ethical violation of 2.04, 2.01, 9.01, all those standards. So I wrote them a 1.04 letter. And that's Exhibit 16 up on my website and into the California board hearing. Exhibit 16 is my 1.04 letter to the 6 instructors. And Exhibit 17 is their 1-page collective response. Now, if it's not satisfied in that way, if the concerns are not satisfied, and they're not, then I'm required, mandatory. We move into 1.05. Okay, so we got the two standards, 1.04 informal resolution, and then 1.05 becomes reporting ethical violations. If there's substantial harm and it's not properly resolved with informal notification, then it says psychologists take further action. Now that's a command statement. It's not psychologists may take further action or should consider further. It says psychologists take further action, a command statement appropriate to the situation. Now what's a situation? What's appropriate to the situation of regulatory capture and institutional betrayal? That becomes the question. Now, the 1.05 then goes on to list 3 possibilities for that further action. First, it says notify a National Committee on Professional Ethics. That's the APA Ethics Committee. Well, I did that in 2018, and I did that in 2025. Then it says notify an appropriate institutional authority Well, in this case, that would be the AFCC. And I did that in 2017, and I did that in 2025. So I'm notifying the AFCC, both at their national convention in 2017 and to the board of directors in 2025. And it says, or their state licensing boards. So I did that because part of the reason I did that is the APA Ethics Committee says we don't review these ethics issues until after the licensing board does. And so they're basically saying, well, take it to the licensing board if you're concerned. So I filed 6 licensing board complaints against 6 of the top, quote unquote, forensic custody evaluators, as Drs. Droid, Sullivan, Deutsch, Moran, Ward, and Klein Pruitt. Now, let me say one of the reasons using names at this point, I didn't use names for the 15 years I was here. You know, I'm saying the forensic custody evaluators, but we've reached the point where these people are harming children and parents. You know, New York Blue Ribbon Commission, dangerous, harmful to children, and they've had plenty of time. I've noticed them, and you don't know what I've done back channel, but they know. 1.04 letter to them in 2025, and you can see their response in Appendix 17. They just do not care about being competent. They do not care about harming children. They do not care about the child abuse in the family courts. Excuse me. And let me say something about that. The moment we start making the diagnosis of the persecutory delusion and child psychological abuse, that's going to admit that we didn't diagnose it, or they didn't diagnose it the entire time. For those 40 years where they were experimenting on parents, they misdiagnosed child abuse. They did not diagnose it. Now, if we start diagnosing it, that indicts them. If we don't diagnose it even now, then we continue with the child abuse in the family courts. So, oh my gosh, it's just quite the dilemma for licensing boards, for the APA, for the AFCC, for the custody evaluators. But the thing is, the custody evaluators need to go. They need to be eliminated. The custody evaluations, we need to go back to diagnosis and treatment. But the moment we do that, all these people are out of work. They don't have their careers. They just vanish overnight. And so that's the regulatory or the institutional capture. They don't want to leave. They're making huge amounts of money from you. This is financial exploitation of you. They couldn't, and so it's a conflict of interest. Oh my goodness, such a conflict of interest. But now the AFCC on that conflict of interest is divided because they have both legal professionals and mental health professionals. So while the mental health professionals are incompetent and harmful to children and don't care and are unethical, the legal professionals they work with in the AFCC are pretty much hopefully asking for competent mental health services. They should want it. The courts, the judges should want competent mental health information, and they're not getting it. And so they should be wanting to get rid of the custody evaluators, get back to clinical diagnosis. And so we're dividing AFCC. So that should be another interesting kind of issue there. But people are harming people. And so gotta talk about that, let you know who the people are that are dangerous and harmful to you and your children, and resulting in potentially disastrous consequences for you and your children. So, for these, the AFCC course instructors, so those are the 6 instructors. In January 2025, a year ago, I took a course because I joined the AFCC. I'm now a member in Washington, California, and Oregon chapters. And so I joined the AFCC, and I started looking. I saw an email come through last December, and it was for this 4-day course, advanced issues in family law, parent-child contact problems. Well, that's a made-up pathology label, so there's problems right there. And so I said, well, let's take the course and see what they're talking about. I took the course, 4 days, 8 modules. I said, no, this is really, really bad. They're in violation of 2.04 and 9.01, 3.04. And so I did a workup on it, slide by slide review. I did all those modules and all their modules slide by slide. Catalog of concerns went along with it. Then I sent them a 1.04 letter with all that information, slide by slide review and the concerns. And then they got their response. That didn't work. And so then after I got their response that then activated my 1.05, that's when I developed Eliza and with her VEIS or VITA analysis. I said, go get their public VITAs. And she got them. And I said, let's analyze them for competence. And you can see how I trained her. It's up on my Substack and it's also up on my website. Where you can see the prompt response log where I train Eliza on how to analyze a VITA and what's going on. And then we walk through each of those VITAs. Then just because I tossed in two other prominent forensic custody evaluators, Stahl and Simon, Dr. Stahl and Simon, who literally wrote the book on how to conduct this experiment in forensic custody evaluation. And guess what? They're not competent in delusions and they're not competent in attachment pathology. 8 of the top tier custody evaluators are not even competent. Oh my goodness. They're not expert. They're not competent. They're unethical. They are unethical. And they don't care. And the licensing boards don't care. And the APA doesn't care. And the AFCC doesn't care if they are unethical and incompetent. It's just so bad. And so I did that VITA analysis. And then that's when I sent in the notification to the you can see up on my website, you can get those or in the documented hearing stuff. Exhibit 16 and 17, that's the 1.04 and 1.05 letters. Then the ethics committee notification, that's exhibit 18. So you can see what I told the APA ethics committee. And then exhibit 19, you can see what I told the AFCC board of directors. And then I filed 6 board complaints. And so those are all pending. And so the 6 board complaints here, there's up on my website. If you go over to the media section and down at the bottom, you can see that. So you can see there the top one is the AI protocol that with Eliza and the 8 psychologists. And then those others down below, those are my personal analysis of their VITA. So I walked it through and I blacked out or darkened out the irrelevant parts of their VITA, the presentations they give and opinion articles they write, looking only at the documented education, training, and experience. That's 2.01. So boundaries of competence based on your education, training, and experience. And so I looked at their education, training, and experience, and it's nothing. So bad. And you can look at it. You can look at it yourself. Everybody can look at it. The licensing boards can look at it, and they are, because I sent that was part of the board complaint is the VEIS protocol. So they know, they can see, and they're responsible for protecting you, and they're not. And so, man. But now, right now in January, we're still pending the results of the hearing. But all of that California Board of Psych hearing, the importance of that was I was able to discharge my duty to protect to the California Board of Psychology through the hearing and the exhibits, and to the overall organization for all licensing boards through the California Board. That's the Association of State and Provincial Psychology Boards. That's the overall structure of all the licensing boards. And so through California, through to them, and now I have a few more steps to kind of formally discharge my duty to protect, but it's being discharged. And so that frees me out of the family courts. I've been in family courts for 15 years because I have 2 parallel lines. I have a duty to protect children from child abuse and the parents from spousal abuse. That's a clinical duty because this is abuse pathology. And I have standard 1.05, which is when there's an ethical violation. So there's an ethical violation and there's abuse pathology, and I've got two duties: duty to protect and standards 1.04, 1.05. And so that's what's held me in the family courts. Look at my vita. I'm not out of the family courts. I come from other places, but I'm here because I can't leave. You guys are being abused. I have to make it stop. And so I developed a treatment plan and I described it in my court hearing, and I can describe it and you can see it now as it's actualizing. You guys are on a treatment plan where first thing we do is need to get rid of the forensic custody evaluators. We need to address the institutional capture and regulatory capture and institutional betrayal. We have to stop the custody evaluators. And so here we are in 2025. I've brought it up to we're directly in this situation. So another phrase I'm reminded of: you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make him drink. I can do everything I possibly can, which I've done. I've got YouTube videos up there, a diagnostic series. I tell everybody how to diagnose delusions, how to diagnose persecutory thought disorders, how to diagnose attachment pathology, how to diagnose child abuse, and what the DSM-5 diagnosis is. I tell everybody, there it is. I can lead you to water. There it is. They don't care. Now, you parents, I suggest you watch this, but so that you know what should be done. But holy cow, why aren't they watching? Why they don't care about being competent? I can spoon feed it to them and they just don't lift a little pinky because it's just so bad, so bad. So these are up on YouTube. Plus, I've got a contingent visitation schedule. You want to know the treatment? Contingent visitation schedule, that's up on YouTube as well. And it's in a booklet. So I've got booklets on this. Okay. So if you want to know the assessment protocol, here it is. The booklet on the assessment protocol. You want to know the contingent visitation schedule? Here's your booklet. Contingent visitation schedule. You can go on Amazon. I priced them real cheap. You can give these to your psychologist. You can give them to the custody evaluator. You can give them to the judge and say, Judge, I'd like this type of assessment. Or Judge, I'd like, contingent visitation schedule as treatment. Problem is, you won't be able to get it. Oops, let me drop that. You won't be able to get it because the custody evaluators control the field and they don't know how to do this stuff. And they don't want to learn. And so, oh well, you're kind of stuck. They only give you their custody evaluation. So I don't know. There's no solution for you. You can't get a diagnosis of child abuse for your child. They won't protect your child. They won't protect you. They refuse to protect your child from child abuse by your pathological ex, who is delusional. That's a psychiatric disorder. Your ex has a major psychiatric disorder. Oh my goodness. We need to diagnose that. It's a delusion out of trauma, unresolved trauma, distorting their thinking and perception. See dangers where none exist. And they won't diagnose a major psychiatric disorder, and they won't, because they don't diagnose it, your attorney can't go in and argue for a child protection response because they don't get the diagnosis out of the mental health people of child abuse. Unbelievable. But it's there. You can watch the video. Now, what this video was, last time the APA came to Seattle. So I said, oh, in 2024, they came to Seattle. So I said, you're going to come to me? Oh, that's great. So I put in a proposal and I presented to them on the contingent visitation schedule. There's your treatment protocol. Now, I came home immediately after that and I did the same presentation, same slides on YouTube. And so that's what the YouTube presentation is. It's the same presentation I gave at the APA on how to run a contingent visitation schedule. So you have it. It's there. Diagnosis series, contingent visitation schedule, everything is up on the web. You can get it all. But nobody cares. Oh, well. Until we get competence, until we get somebody who cares about ethical standards and stuff, then I can do all the work necessary, and it doesn't matter. So that's kind of the situation. Oh, plus I've got vignettes up. So this again, and if you go to my consulting website over to the YouTube section, all this stuff is up on my YouTube section, diagnosis series and the continued visitation schedule and these vignettes. So I've got a bunch of vignettes, several that look at a narcissistic pattern, several that look at the borderline pattern, different qualities in each of the vignettes. You can watch them, mix and match. The mental health people can watch them and get advice about what their pattern is and how to respond in that particular pattern, whether it's a borderline mom pattern and with higher anxiety and false allegations, or a narcissistic dad pattern with a more spousal abuse feel kind of to it. Then they can watch and learn. They don't care. So I've got all those up. And then I've got the booklets I showed you, so you can grab these off of Amazon. I've got my book. I describe, the pathology in great detail, in Foundations. I'll do a second edition of that as soon as I have a chance, but that's from 2015, over a decade ago. I've explained it in detail: family systems, personality disorder, and attachment pathology. I explain everything in Foundations. I give you a treatment. I give you the assessment protocol, 6 sessions. You can assess in 6 sessions. You want to know how to do the assessment? Go watch the videos. And the treatment protocol, contingent visitation schedule. Okay, I can do everything, but until somebody cares, nothing's going to happen. Institutional capture, regulatory capture, and institutional betrayal. That's what's happening. It's textbook example, textbook. All of it is now documented into the record. And so it's just a matter, the moment a single licensing board says, look, we need to pull these custody evaluations and stop them, the entire system will collapse, because that's going to put pressure on the other licensing boards. And the moment they pull the forensic custody evaluator, they're going to realize they have no mental health services in the family courts, zero, nothing. And they've been in violation of the multiple ethical standards for 40 years. The AI, I run it through AI, you can look at my blog on this, is estimating between anywhere from 300,000 to 1.5 million victims of institutional betrayal trauma, the undiagnosed child abuse and undiagnosed spousal abuse. Hundreds of thousands of now adult children and parents over the last 40 years, with about maybe 2,500 new cases coming in the United States every year. And then they go for about 5-6 years in the family courts. And so you got just tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of abuse victims that we're talking about here. The scandal that is coming is going to be huge. But right now it's being covered up because the custody evaluators are making money. And the moment they admit, oh, maybe our experiment failed, everything collapses. And the moment they start diagnosing it, then they start diagnosing the child abuse they admit they didn't diagnose it this entire time. So what a nightmare. So the other third phrase I'm reminded of is that if the mountain won't go to Mohammed, then Mohammed must come to the mountain. So yep, I'm not leaving this in. So let's bring the AFCC to me in 2016. So yep, the AFCC National Convention is coming to Seattle, May 27th and 30th. That's my view, okay? And that's like I go down to the little bay here, and it's kind of nice. And so the AFCC is coming to the mountain. Now, the question, as I wrap up here this Sunday, the question for me, and kind of for you, as we, I got a couple months to consider this, is what should I do? with them being here in my little hometown. I'm going to go, so I'll get a ticket and I'll go and listen to their stuff. But if I listen to their stuff, is that going to activate 1.04 for me? Yeah. Okay. And is that going to activate 1.05 for me? Yeah. Well, then I've got mandatory obligations to informally notify what the instructors of the various seminars who are in violation of 2.01, 2.04, 9.01, and 3.04, as well as 8.01. And so I have to notify them and take further action appropriate to the situation, since informal notification is not going to resolve it when it's an institutional thing, when the whole convention is in violation of standards. And I've got a bunch of legal professionals wandering around with me at the time. No, I put in for a couple of presentation proposals. They didn't take them. One was on AI, and I think the other was on the custody contingent visitation schedule. And they said, no, we don't want to hear it. Contingent visitation schedule. I presented the APA on that. APA division, law and society wants to hear that. AFCC don't want to hear about the contingent visitation schedule. Okay. They don't want a solution. They do not want a solution. And they don't want to hear about AI in the family courts. Okay. No worries. So I think they just didn't want to hear from me, because it was probably a wise decision, because I would have told them, you're in violation of multiple ethical standards, but now I don't get to tell them. One thought was, maybe I should just get myself a table in the exhibitors hall and just sit there handing out stuff and saying, and I can publish up some stuff about your violations of ethical standards and stuff, because I own a publishing house. Oh my goodness, Kindle Direct Publishing is such a wonderful age. So I can publish the stuff and hand it out to them and just sit behind the table. But then I said, why am I spending my money and hundreds of dollars to get a table and stuff and organizing all of this stuff? I'm done. My duty to protect is over. Okay. I don't need to do that stuff anymore. It's up to the licensing boards. It's up to the APA. It's up to you guys. It's you and your children. Go to your legislators. Get a class action lawsuit. You're going to have to fix this, because look, old guy, I'm out of here. It's your families, your children. And I should not be working harder than you guys are in this situation. I should not be working harder than the client. So I figure, well, if you guys get me a table, I'll go sit at it. But that has to be you. You have to come up with some sort of organization and buy a table and do it and do a GoFundMe but now I know several of you started a GoFundMe and tried to get me to accept the money, and I'm not taking the money. No, I'm not saying no, because I don't want to do that. Okay, it's not my job to do that. Okay, if you get a table as some sort of organization, I will go sit at the table and hand out stuff and get the handout. That's what I'll do. But if you're not motivated to get a table or do anything, well, then I'll just go. But then when I go, what should I say? So if I listen to a presentation, say on parent-child contact problems, and there's no talk about delusions, no talk about attachment, then that's going to be a 2.04 violation, 9.01 violation. And so then, into 3.04 violation. And there's the constant 8.01 if they talk about custody evaluations. So I'm going to be in a situation where I believe there may have been an ethical violation by another psychologist. So what should I do? Informal notification. If they ask for questions, should I ask a question? What question? What's your response to the to the New York Blue Ribbon Commission saying that your custody evaluations are dangerous and harmful to children? That's probably an easy question I can always ask in any of the seminars about that. But ask about the IRB approval. Why, do forensic custody evaluations, should they receive IRB approval, given that New York Blue Ribbon Commission found they're dangerous and harmful to children? I don't know. I can be a bit of a pain. And I might be recognizable if I'm walking around the hallways and stuff. Should I go up and approach them during a break? Should I approach the legal professionals? If there's a judge there, should I go up to the judge and say, hey, you're getting bad information from your psychology people in the AFCC? I don't know. Oh, but I've got a couple months to figure it out. So think about that. I might be going forward, asking on my Facebook page or something, what should I do? And here's the thing, and I'll wrap up now, but here's the thing. For 15 years, I have known of my ethical obligations, and I have walked consistent with those. Now the question coming up to this AFCC convention is, what is the right thing to do? Okay, according to 1.04, 1.05, and my duty to protect, given that we have widespread incompetence and unethical practice, what is the right thing for a psychologist who is competent? What should I do in that situation? That's the ethical question. And so that's an interesting one. And that's going to be hopefully part of my article, because I want to write an article for Ethics and Behavior about what I have done and how standards 1.04 and 1.05 are the response to institutional capture and institutional betrayal, because they require an individual psychologist to take steps, and that will ultimately break the institutional capture. What I needed to do at the hearing was to hold shape. That's what my AI and I call it. Is I just have to hold shape within the ethical container, and I was able to do that. Stressful, but I was able to do that. Now, when I hold shape, that's going to collapse the house of cards, the structure. But now, if we get pressure on that from the outside, from parents and legislators and things, outside pressure, that's going to facilitate the collapse. And the moment it collapses, then we can get the changes in. But it's going to take a class action, I think, because it's going to take the settlement from that. 50 state licensing boards, APA, AFCC, and individual evaluators, i.e. their malpractice insurance. When you get the settlement with the state licensing boards, the states, and with the APA, then you can get the funding from the states to do either a pilot study for the family courts to develop the diagnostic assessment and treatment protocols, or you can get just the funding to outreach for the now adult children and the parents who lost their kids over the 40 years. We need to outreach to them and help fix the institutional betrayal trauma. We have obligations. APA has obligations. And so if you get the funding out of the states, then you can get the APA as part of their settlement to create the programs to recruit psychologists into the family courts and to do the training. They've already got the training protocols, my diagnosis series and stuff, but you can get the training in the delusions and attachment and in complex trauma, child abuse, and then you start running the VITAs through AIs and do proactive reassurance that they know what they're doing and that sort of stuff. Continuing education on diagnosis and treatment of family court pathology and stuff. But it's going to take some settlement. It's going to take some money. It's going to take some focus, because right now there's zero motivation, and 5% motivation isn't going to solve it. The moment you get those custody evaluators out, everything collapses. There is no mental health services in the family courts. And oh my God, this is child abuse. This is dark personalities, dark triad, dark tetrad, sadism, psychopathy, pathological narcissism, child abuse, spousal abuse in the family courts, and no mental health services, no diagnosis, no treatment. Because if anybody tries to come in, you're going to have Dr. Childress sitting here with his AI saying you're not competent, and they're not, so they're not going to come in, and the forensic custody evaluators are going, what a nightmare, what a nightmare. And it's all coming up in May. How fun. So with that, I'm going to head off to my Sunday. Good luck, everybody, and take care. And we'll see you next Sunday. Bye-bye.